Okay, so in your oil pastel kit, you have sandpaper, which is super important. Don't lose it. I'm gonna show you what you use it for. It's very important, especially if you're gonna be using this art book. You have 25 oil pastels, and you have a different one, but a plastic knife. So those are the things included in the oil pastel kit, and that's all you're gonna need to create the different projects that we're gonna work on. So I'm gonna show you my oil pastels and how I take care of them. So I always keep them in the box. When I put them away, I take a Kleenex or a paper towel and I wipe off all the colors so that they're nice and clean, just gently. And to do that, I'm gonna show you, I only have my studio towel here, but say I have one and it's dirty, I put it on the paper towel or the studio towel, I hold it gently just with a little bit of pressure and I turn it, and that'll get it nice and clean. So when you put them away, try to put them in color order. Even if one breaks, keep it together in the box, and then make sure that your pastel box is closed up. If you take care of them, they will stay nice for a long time. If you do not take care of them, they might end up looking like this hot mess. I'm not going to name the child in my house who these belong to, but they are not super looked after. Many are missing. There's a couple naked pastels rolling around the table. It's not a good scene. These are like oil paint, so you want to treat them really well. They're fancy, they're nice. This is a really nice brand of pastel, so if you treat it well, you'll be able to create lots of things with it. The next thing you have is this sandpaper. Now you can get custom created pastel paper, but I actually have a hack for that. So this is just a regular notebook, and this is my notebook. And if I want to use it for pastels, I don't want to do this when I use it for markers, but if I'm going to use it for pastels, I take my sandpaper and I just gently rub a little bit of texture onto that paper. And you can brush off the dust. And what this does is it creates texture on the paper. And you'll see those little paper fibers, if you look carefully, stick up. Now, it's very important to gently sand your paper. That's all you have to do, just a little bit, before you start pastels. What this does, it allows you to build color. So let me show you one. So this is one, and this is the first activity in the pastels. It's the blending techniques. So you can check out the video for that, this activity to show you how to do it. But I've sanded this first. Now, if I didn't sand it, it's hard to build up color because the pastel has nothing to stick to. Let's see here. I have some that I wasn't sanding. So here's some more of my oil pastels. So this is my I Am Patient. This one I'm still working on. It's kind of a blending fun. But if you look earlier on, I wasn't sanding the paper, and especially the greens and the purples had a really hard time building those colors up. So you want to make sure you sand the paper, and it's the difference between something like this and something that looks a little bit smoother. So that is my introduction to oil pastels. The next part of the video is going to be the different ways to blend. And I will show you the different ways to blend. But just to review, before you use your oil pastels, make sure you're taking care of them, keeping them clean, keeping them in the box as much as you can. It doesn't have to be perfect. They're going to get used up. They're going to get smaller. They may break. But if you take care of them, you can still make good art with them. You're going to use your sandpaper. I like to keep the sandpaper tucked into my journal because you need it to use it before you do your art. So we're going to move on now to the different blending techniques, and I'm going to show you that on a PowerPoint slide. All right, so we are going to go into a little bit of information about how to mix your pastels. We're going to talk about blending. And what blending does, it just allows you to layer your colors and create really interesting, satisfying, and fun art. So one thing to keep in mind are the colors red, yellow, and blue are primary colors, which means you can't get them by mixing your colors together. Those are the ones that just are, and you can add colors to them. And when you do that, you want to try to stick with colors that are close together on the color wheel. So because of the way the pigments work in the oil pastels, if you were to mix red and green together, you would get mud. The best way, and you can practice this, you can make mud. This is your art exploration. But I do recommend sticking with colors that are close together on the color wheel. So when you're practicing the blending techniques I'm about to show you, stick with colors that are close together on the color wheel. Your pastel box is laid out in this order, so it's easy to do. So I would stick with red and orange and yellow, they play well together, or purple and blue play really well together. You can mix some red in there, but don't go too far. I'm not going to say don't. I'm going to say your most satisfying art is going to come when you stick with your colors that are closest to each other on the color wheel. But if you want to discover what else you can make, that's cool too. But if you're someone kind of like me who gets frustrated easily, stick with colors close together on the color wheel when you're getting started. Pick colors close together in the color wheel. What can I say? I like to repeat myself. Okay, the first technique we're going to talk about is exactly what it sounds like. And you can see I'm going to do two examples here. The first was on a sanded page where I sanded the page first. The second, you'll see I did not sand the page first, and the layering is a little tougher, but it's a good thing to pay attention to. Okay, so here you can tell I'm picking colors that are close together on the color wheel. I have red, dark orange, light yellowy orange, and then I begin to blend in some yellows. I did put some green in, but not until all of my orange and red were kind of out of my blending. All right, let's see here. So here's your blending technique with heavy lines. And I start with the red, I move to the orange, I'm pressing hard, and I'm moving all in one direction. What this does is it puts a very heavy coating on your paper, coating of pastel. This is really, really dramatic. It gives you a really dramatic effect. Here I'm doing it with the blues and the greens. And this I didn't sand the paper, so it didn't stick so great, but that's okay. You can get the idea. So I'm moving in lines. I'm going to show you that one more time. Moving in those heavy, heavy lines, pressing hard on my pastel, not too hard because you will snap the pastel, but applying some pressure to the pastel. I move all in one direction and I layer my colors, starting with my darkest color, working my way to my lighter colors. Heavy line blending. And go over it over and over and over again until you get what it looks right to you, which is what I did in these ones. Again, if you don't sand your paper, it's pretty hard to build up the color. Okay, so that's heavy line blending. The next technique we're going to talk about is scumbling. It's a fun word to say, scumbling. And all you're doing when you're scumbling is you're also applying pressure to the pastel. So you're pressing, not too hard, but you're pressing down on your pastel. And you're going around in random circle-y scribbles. So I like to go in circles that kind of, go all around. And then you go back and you fill in the white spots with your other color. So I start, and this is sped up really fast, but I started with my red, and then I'm going to go back here. So I start with my red, and then I go back and I fill in the parts of my red, the white parts, with my orange, because I'm blending the red and the orange together. So for this one, you can play around with coloring in the white spots. with another color. So I make a bunch of scribbles and then I go over it with another color and color in those white spots with a different color and just keep building the pastels on top of each other. Again, here I did not sand my paper. Okay, so scumbling again, going around in random circles with one color and then going over it with another color and filling in those light spaces. So I filled in those white spaces with the orange. Working your way again, stay with the color wheel here. Working your way from your darkest color to your lightest color and building up, building up, building up. Play around with this. It's pretty fun. And you want to layer. The thing that makes this a good technique is the ability for you to layer. Layer, 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 layer. It makes a big difference. And that's why we sand our paper, because as you can see here, it was very hard to build up layers on that paper. Okay, on to light layer blending. So this is one of my favorite ones, but it is a more time-consuming one. So let's just press play here. So this is a more time-consuming one because you have to do so many layers, but the result is so smooth. So I'm just putting very light layers. I like to cross-hatch, which is to go one way really light and then go the other way. And you can gently layer on top of your dark color. So start with your dark color and then layer on top. Here, again, didn't sand the paper, but this was pretty easy to build up those layers. I had to go very slow. So gentle. You don't use a lot of pressure when you light layer blend. Barely any pressure, actually. Little bit of pressure, and the key is to build up many layers. That's where you're going to get your best, the best out of this technique. Okay, I'm going to show you that one more time. Just the beginning part. So light scribbling, light layer blending is just light scribbling. See how really light scribbling, and then you do layer over layer over layer over layer. So this is a really lovely way to get a smooth look to your pastels. It does take more time, but I think it's worth it for some artistic applications, some reasons. It's also really fun. So take your time with it, have a little fun with it. I think you're going to enjoy light layer blending. We are going to move on to stippling. This is not, this is a very different technique. You can use this whenever you want to create landscapes. It's very helpful. I like this for leaves on trees. And all you do is you make some dots. So, dot, 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 dots and dashes, random dots and dashes all over. And then you can layer. So you can see here I layered the red. I layered some orange on the red. I layered some yellow into the orange. And that's how you mix. My camera skills weren't so great on this one, but you can see, there we go. You can see how I'm just doing dots on top of dots on top of dots on top of dots, and it begins to blend together. Again, start with your darkest color. Okay, I'm just gonna play that one more time. Always start with your darkest color. It's really important. Actually, no, I'm not gonna tell you always. I'm gonna say I recommend starting with your darkest color and working up, but play with it. If you want to start with a light color and see what happens, it is a different look. So I'm never going to tell you what to do, but I'm going to tell you start with your dark colors, and then you can, after you've practiced that way, play around with it. There is no right or wrong here. I'm trying very hard to use that neutral language. Okay, I'm going to show you texturing now. And what texturing is, so scratching and texturing, and you have that plastic knife, that's what this is for. You can put a layer of pastels on any way you like. This is a heavy line blending that I did. And some blending on top. And you're going to discover your own blending style and your own style for pastels. So this is just the starting point, but I'm sure you'll discover how you like to create. And then you take your knife and
you can make designs in your pastel. So putting a layer, a nice heavy layer, you want to put a heavy layer down of your pastel. And here I'm doing that with kind of a heavy line blending. And then you go over it and you just scrape patterns into it. That's all you're doing. And this last technique I don't have in the oil pastel blending activity, but feel free to use it. It's actually pretty cool. So you're going to need one of your paintbrushes, and you're going to need some kind of vegetable oil. So sunflower oil is what I use in this, but olive oil works not as great. Sunflower, canola oil, any clear oil works really well. And this is what we're going to do. So if you want to try this one, it's really awesome, but you want to make sure all your pastel is on the paper first. So you put down a heavy layer of pastel, you paint a little tiny bit of oil on, and then you blend it with your fingers. It's pretty fun. So I invite you to try this one. I forgot to include it in the video activity, but you can see it's hard to add more pastel after you've put the oil. So make sure you put all the pastel you want down before you do your before you add the oil, because once you put the oil down, it's really difficult to add more layers of pastel. So it's something to try and experiment with if you are feeling adventurous. So again, stick with your color wheel. I like to say to students or artists, when they're beginning their pastel journey, try to stick with cool colors and warm colors and group them together. So try practice blending your warm colors and your cool colors. Just try them. Try sticking to each color family at a time so that you can really experience how fun the blending can be. That being said, feel free to experiment.
The last thing I wanted to mention in the intro to oil pastels is the cleanup for oil pastels. So you're responsible for taking care of your art supplies. You want to wipe your pastels gently with a paper towel, put them back into the box where they're safe, in color order if possible. Clean up all the bits of pastel on your table, make sure nothing fell on the floor. Just clean it up with a wet cloth or paper towel, and wash your brush really well if you used it with oil. Use dish soap to wash it really well. When it's dry, you can put it back in your art kit. Thank you so much for learning with me, and you can check out the first oil pastel inquiry that's on the same page for what you can do to practice these blending techniques. And I hope you have a beautiful, creative day.